Welcome to today's training video. I'm Steve Stedman. I'm the founder of Stedman Solutions. Today we're going to talk about one of the common items reported by the SQL Daily Checkup. And the SQL Daily Checkup is a product that we make available to monitor and keep track of what's going on with your SQL Server. And we're going to cover one of the items and what it means and what we can do to resolve it. All right, the SQL Daily Checkup from Stedman Solutions. This is a product that we make, that we install on your server, that monitors and lets us know when there's issues, and it lets you know with alerting and notification what some of those issues are. Let me show you an example. Here's an example of the output of one of those reports, and this is just on one of my test servers, but you would get an email with different notice of where the problem areas are, some of the reports of specific issues. Like here it's showing CheckDB not run recently. But today we're just going to take a look at one of those issues and what we can do to resolve it. The high virtual log count warning that comes out from the daily monitoring is one of those things that can be really important. What this means is that the database that we're monitoring has greater than several hundred virtual log files. So first off, what is a virtual log file? Well, when SQL Server creates a log file, it might be a couple of megabytes, or it might be a couple gigabytes, or many gigabytes. And inside of that log file are different chunks of the file that can be used to store different amounts of log data. And if you initially create the file in small chunks, it grows with each of these usable chunks as being very small. The problem you run into is if you get too many of these, you end up in a position where it's really slow to do database restores. In fact, it can be so slow that it can add hours to the time it takes to restore your database if your VLF count is too high. Example was I worked with a customer on a restore of a database where it was taking over 8 hours to do the restore. Afterwards, I tested it and confirmed that that database had over 150,000 virtual log files, and that a majority of that time was taken to restore and rebuild the log file. We reduced the number of VLFs in the log file and attempted the restore again, and it restored in just about an hour. So many hours of time was spent specifically on a delayed restore. So if you want to look at how to see what your VLF files look like inside of your log, you can look at stevestedman.com/VLF. And in there, there'll be an article called Visualizing VLFs, another update. And when we click on that, there's some sample code here. And then this item, see how it says only on SQL Server 2012 and newer. If you're running this on a previous version of SQL Server 2000 or before 2012, comment out this one line, and everything else will work the same. But what this does is it looks at your log and shows you what your virtual log file looks like. So let's take a look at how that code works with an actual database. Here is a test database that I set up. I simply called it VLF test. And what I did is I set some of the settings to cause some problem. But this is one of those things that you could do that could happen on an actual database. I did it this way by I set the log file growth to grow in 1 megabyte chunks. That's really small. Normally you do much larger than that. But the same thing could happen where if you were doing 100 megabytes or even 10 megabytes or a percentage, you could end up with lots of log files. But by setting this to 1 megabyte, that caused a problematic situation where the log file grew too fast. So what I did is I just created a single table in this database with a couple of GUIDs as values, and then a varchar column with some data in it, just taking up some space. And then I inserted a few 100,000 rows into it and did some updates, and basically did a bunch of things that caused the log file to grow. And then I created an index and did some more updates and some inserts. And then if we take a look at this script from my website, where we visualize the VLF, what this does is it kind of draws a bar chart down here below with zeros and X's showing what's in use and what's not used. And based off of how this little database that I created grew by inserting all those rows, it grew in 1 megabyte chunks. And if we look at the number of rows, we scroll down, it's just over 1,001 virtual log files inside of that actual SQL Server log file. Now, one of the things that can cause your log file to grow and create lots of chunks like this is if you don't back up for a while. If your backup process is broken and your log just continues to grow, and then you start running backups again, your log might be bloated. Now, generally, I like to see this number of rows in the few hundred. Now, maybe 400 or 500, 600 isn't a big deal, but anytime you start getting over 1,000 or more than 10,000, or even in the 100,000 range for the number of VLFs or virtual log files, that can really bog things down. It can really slow things down. So what we recommend doing when it gets to this point is first backing up your database and clearing out the log, but that doesn't delete the files, it just deletes what's in use. And then if your log file needs to be the size it is, we recommend shrinking the log file, growing it out again to the size it needs to be, but growing it in bigger chunks rather than in smaller chunks. And that will make it so that you have a big enough log file for what you need to manage, but not as many virtual log file chunks or pieces inside of your log file. So as it says here, it's recommended that this can cause problem and performance. And you can do this without any downtime. However, you want to do it at a time where the server's not being heavily used. And what you do is you back up the database. You then shrink the log file down to something where there's a lower number of VLFs. And then you expand the log file out in bigger chunks and get it to a point where the VLF files count is not too high. Here's some more information that may help you out. My blog, where we can get more information, stevestedman.com or stedmansolutions.com. And the last link will be the Stedman Solutions SQL Daily Checkup monthly subscription. We have lots of people using the SQL Daily Checkup today. And if it's something that you'd like to use, let me know and we'll get it set up for you. All right. Have a great day.